Welcome to Edison Open House Global Healthcare 2022. In this session, we're highlighting the work of OpGen, a company specializing in precision medicine approaches to infectious disease. With me is their CEO, Oliver Schacht. Oliver, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, running right through your company is this focus on antimicrobial resistance. Tell us about this and your approach generally.
Sure. If you look at OpGen today, we're the combination of OpGen Inc. here in the United States as a parent company, together with Curetis based in Germany, as well as Irish Genetics in Vienna, Austria. And all three companies combine this theme of fighting antimicrobial resistance with multiple platforms and products. On the one hand, we have our PCR workhorse, sample in, answer out platform, the Unyvero platform by Curetis, which is FDA cleared for lower respiratory tract infections such as pneumonia, where we're currently running urinary tract infection clinical trial, as well as a joint infection trial in planning. We also have the OpGen Curetis portfolio, which recently we saw FDA clearance of the Curetis AMR gene panel for isolates. It's the first of its kind cleared by the United States FDA, covering a very broad set of 28 genetic antimicrobial resistance markers and 26 pathogens, covering 9 different classes of antibiotics. And then with Irish Genetics, this is really the platform based on next generation sequencing data, artificial intelligence and machine learning based algorithms, allowing us to predict not only antimicrobial resistance, but in fact predict antibiotic susceptibility, providing the data intelligence that may help clinicians choose which antibiotics actually should still work given the AMR profile. So all of these platforms combining products as well as services, especially on the Irish Genetics side, and collaborations with strategic partners together is really what drives OpGen forward in this space of fighting antimicrobial resistance, which we really believe is the sort of silent pandemic that's underlying the current and resurging COVID pandemic. Slower in pace, but nonetheless equally worrisome at a global level, with the potential for many, many more people dying of antimicrobial resistance in the coming decades than have died thus far from COVID-19.
So to put it in a nutshell, what you're doing is taking us away from the approach in which doctors used to just diagnose the disease and then give an antibiotic and hoped it worked before or while they try to isolate whatever the causative organism. Whereas what you're doing is this precision medicine approach. You're absolutely nailing what the organism is in close to patient testing so that they can immediately be given the right drug for that particular organism.
Exactly. It's not only identifying the pathogen, but we're always detecting the pathogen, and this is really the other side of the coin, joining together with the antimicrobial resistance information, allowing clinicians within a matter of just a few short hours to choose the right set of antimicrobial drugs, antibiotics for the patient, as opposed to what they're doing today is really in the absence of any rapid diagnostic test. They're using broad spectrum antibiotics for several days until they get the result from classical microbiology culture.
And that's driving antimicrobial resistance. So tell me, what is, you've described the Irish Genetics platform and database. Can you describe what your licensing strategy is going forward for that?
Well, so there's a couple of strands to that business. On the one hand, we have an active service business where we're providing isolate sequencing service. We're providing services around our universal pathogenome assay. And we've talked about this on a number of earnings calls recently. We already have multiple European countries and their national reference labs working with Irish Genetics on using that sort of platform. On the partnering and licensing side, we've recently announced a strategic data access deal with one of the leading global corporates in the microbiology diagnostic space as an IVD corporate. Really, if you look at research analysts, I think they've picked up on this. There's only a very small number of usual suspects, such as Beckman Dickinson, Beckman Coulter, or bioMérieux. We unfortunately are not in a position to disclose the identity, but again, one of the leading global IVD corporates in the space. And what we've done here is made available a very small subset, roughly 1.1% of the total data asset. The total RSDB today constitutes roughly 78,000 deep sequenced, next-gen sequenced genetic isolates from bacteria in combination with the phenotypic data. And so that small subset, on a non-exclusive basis, we've sold that data to the partner for an undisclosed sum. But again, I would point to some of the sell-side research analysts out there who've come up with, argue very sensible estimates that clearly highlight that the underlying core value of that data asset that Ars Genetics has is in the several tens of millions of euro range.
And actually, thanks to COVID, everybody now knows what genomic sequencing is and just how important it is. And it seems to me that there is an indication way beyond the US and there are global markets here. Would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. Well, so obviously, as a company, we're already active in Europe. The roots of Curetis and Ares historically have come from Europe. So not too surprising, that's been the early commercial rollout. That said, with OpGen, we now have a direct sales and marketing organization in the United States where we're commercializing our Unyvero platform and products, as well as now the Curetis AMR gene panel. And then as we announced in our most recent earnings call, we will be bringing Ars Genetics to the US as well in 2022. And to that end, have already begun making certain key strategic hires and adding complementary skills and expertise here in the US to the team for Ars Genetics specifically. So come 2022, you should see OpGen as a global group to be active in the United States through a direct team, in Europe through services as well as distribution partnerships. And then indeed globally, well, we do have distribution partners primarily for our Unyvero portfolio, anywhere from the Middle East to China, Asia Pacific, to Latin America. And again, that distribution piece of business is one that we have been and continue to be actively growing. And it will continue to be a growth driver for OpGen, China being the predominant focus here, with the instrument, the Unyvero system, already approved, a small scale and ancillary or supplementary study pending in China, and then a Chinese regulatory approval for the pneumonia panel, which again would be a key to drive in OpGen's growth, given that that partnership has minimum commitments that over an 8-year period would cumulatively add up to roughly $180 million in revenue to OpGen.
Wow, that sounds like you've got a really exciting year coming up. Anything else that investors ought to look out for? Although, that's quite enough in itself, it sounds like.
Well, we've been able to, following the business combination in 2020, this year in 2021, we've gotten FDA clearance for our Curetis AMR panel. We have initiated the urinary tract infection clinical trial that's ongoing, a multi-center prospective clinical trial. There's going to be exciting data points from an interim analysis that we guided to becoming available towards the end of Q1 in 2022. And then, of course, the full data readout from the urinary tract infection trial and FDA submission in 2022, as well as initiating our invasive joint infection clinical trial. We're looking at the more corporate commercial side, of course, driving revenue growth through direct sales in the US and through partners and distributors globally is going to be at the forefront. And then the strategic partnering side, as we have shown with Ars Genetics, there's a huge potential of unrecognized or unrealized value that we can certainly tap into through smart licensing and partnering activities. I would point to the one area, the Unyvero A30 platform, a next generation rapid PCR platform, smaller, faster, cheaper than the current Unyvero. That's currently in active, ongoing partnering conversations. And again, we're looking at anything from global deals to potentially regional or indication-specific deals, whether it's in the US, in Europe, or in other parts of the world. So there's going to be plenty of milestones from clinical trials, from commercial traction, as well as strategic partnering and deal announcements that we look forward to sharing with our shareholders in 2022.
And of course, all within this kind of global overview of antimicrobial resistance and combating that, because as you say, that is the next pandemic. Indeed, it is going on right now.
Absolutely.
Oliver, thank you so much for being with us.
Vivian, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.